Tabletop terrors. It's a total party kill. Tabletop terrors. They will get you, yes they will. Tabletop terrors. Raising all your stats, baby boy. Tabletop terrors. Have gelatinous cubes as pets, other baby boy. Terror, 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 terror on a tabletop. Terror, 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 terror on a tabletop. Terror, 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 terror on a tabletop. What's going on, everybody? This is Tabletop Terrors, and you're watching live vlog. I just wasted 2 minutes of your life with lounge music of our theme song, but this is Daily Damage. It's a chat, and I want to talk to you about the races of our campaign realm of Dragongrin. If this is your first time here, listen, we're all about having fun and helping you become more creative. The vehicle we use to do that is tabletop RPGs. So, if you didn't already glean that this is a super horse hockey driven, very conversational stream, then it is. And you probably don't want to be here if you don't like that sort of thing. But if you like to hang out and you like to talk, you found the right place. And so, I will be chatting, I will be using the comments. I try to do as best as I can. If I miss your comment, I'm sorry. And I always try to read back comments so that you can hear what I'm seeing. Whew. Hey, Matt Click from A Fistful of Dice is here. Matt Click has helped to shape and forge the races that we're going to talk about today in Dragongrin. So, there's some stuff you're going to know already. You maybe have heard it, but everything's been touched. Almost everything changed a little, and some things changed a lot. So what we're going to start with is a high-level, sort of quick description of each race. Then we'll go through and we'll just converse. We'll have a conversation about the different races and some of the fun we had. But this is giving you brand new information about the races of Dragongrin. So let's check the chat and see who's here. Obviously, Mr. Matt Click, what you looking at says, "He who wanders as he ponders." Dude, that phrase is getting into my psyche. I really love that. I need to get that on a shirt. Andrew Knoll. Ooh, a skittering varmint. What's going on, Andrew? Whee, says Nathan Thurston. Matt Click says, the drag races. Hey-o! You see what he did there? Matt Click is a huge fan of RuPaul's Drag Race. If you didn't know already, Twitter knows. Hey, Robert Atkins says, I finally caught you live for once. Well, Robert, that's awesome. I'm glad you're here live to have a conversation. Let's do this. Warmaker777, our very own freelance editor who edits the Tabletop Terror streams like this. You're going to start seeing those next week in the form of something called hit points. Points we want you to hit on, like you're at a bar. Okay. So, he says, I just want to take a piece of every Daily Damage thumbnail and try to see if I can make Tim's face out of the pieces. That would be amazing. Oh, Karen says, hello. Weather is much nicer there than here. It is picturesque. That's the word I would use. Karen Davies, hello. I just read that. What's up, Tim? Says Mornblade Gaming. What's going on, Mornblade Gaming? I hope you're having a great day. Hey, hey, C.A. Hollenbach. It's Tim. Hi, all. Baron Cantrell is here. Matt Click says, no spoilers, please. I'm one episode behind. He's talking about Drag Race. I'm getting a Taco Del Mar burrito and watching it tonight. That sounds like a Matt Click Friday. Dude, that's killer. All right, so I brought a cheat sheet, stapled papers, because I want to make sure that I hit on some of the cool stuff we talked about. I'm going to use this as a guide. But like I said, high-level information about all the races, just to kind of give you an idea of the flavors we're cooking in Dragongrin. All this is subject to change. So you got to follow us to see how the races shape and grow. So we're going to start with dwarves because they're first on my list. So, the Drogus dwarves. The Drogus dwarves live upon an ocean that is in the cavernous realm called Sphere Below. So just imagine this mega cavern that was dug out by like progenitor demigods, and then people settled it. Well, these dwarves are scrapper dwarves. They live on a barge city. They essentially have lashed together their city, and they're scavengers in the Goalless Ocean. Now, some say that the Goalless Ocean is actually Titan blood, it's demigod blood. Others posit that it's just a sort of a fluid leakage from this super dungeon called Deep Vault, but still many believe that maybe it's a mixture of both, and that no one can really explain it. The Grimdal dwarves. These have changed quite a bit since you may have heard about them. Imagine the Grimdal dwarves as being like larger than normal dwarves. Grimdal dwarves are probably about the size of orcs or larger. They're also known as broad-fisted dwarves, and so they live sort of like hobbits, like if they were gentle, peaceful folk that lived on the plains, in the grasslands and hills. But when we were kind of going through, Matt made a really good point. He said, hey man, there's just not enough mustard on these, not enough player mustard, not enough character mustard. And so we kind of brainstormed back and forth, and we were like, all right, here's what we're gonna do. The Grimdal, now, still all of those things apply. Add to that, they have a Fey curse upon them, okay? This Fey curse is lycanthropy. And so they have done quite a bit to keep the curse at bay, but essentially, think werebears and wereboars and that sort of thing, were-rams. That's what these dwarves are. But we'll go into more of that later. So, the Uldane dwarves, okay? So the Uldane dwarves are dwarves who live bleakward. There's so much bleak, there's so much arcane storm happening that the very direction in which they live isn't north, it's known as bleakward. So, think the toughest sort of classic dwarves you can, then put them in the center of an arcane maelstrom in a war with what we call our Dragonborn, which are the dragon-bound. And when they die, they turn to stone. They are really cool. I love them. So, those are the dwarves. Let's go to the comments and just kind of see here. Matt says, Matt Click Friday, trademark. Talking about that. Taco Warmaker, awesome. I always find the way that races are portrayed as the foundation of a setting. It's a huge part, and dialing in the tone and what you allow and kind of how we painted it is a big piece of making Dragongrin something that's unique, but not so unique that it's weird or, you know, something that is alienating to players. So we're trying to dial in these races in such a way that they're unique but feel familiar, if that makes any kind of sense. Hey, what's up, Syntax AI? BF Lummy, hello, hello. Just finished work, finally caught a live video. What's up, Rackaboo Entertainment? I'm glad you're here. All right, so the next is the Elves. So you have the Elves of Talis. These are kind of like your classic wood elves. They live in this floating, enormous city-sized life tree known as Talis, hence the name. The kind of sentry-esque, very classic guarding Talis, and at the center of Talis there's a maze called the Root Gate, and in the center of the Root Gate is the entrance to the Feywild, or what we call in our world the Fey Mists. And so Talis are the remnant of the elves of old, and so they're very classic, but we kind of thought, okay, it's cool, put them up in a sky tree with floating longboats, that kind of thing. So that's the Talis elves. And then, oh man, this is one of the coolest ones, the Dorsai elves. Matt himself has said that this is one of his favorite races in Dragongrin. They basically survive through the murky depths. The Dorsai elves began much like the Talis elves, and they had a city atop the waves. But through their hubris, they tried to tap into the Shadowfell, or in our world we call it the Desolation, and it failed. And their epic sort of wave city sank, very similar to like an Atlantis situation. But once it sank through the powers of the desolation, or the Forgotten Realms one, Shadowfell. It essentially twisted them. So now the Dorsai elves are these gray-skinned, sort of Lovecraftian elves that if they spend too much time outside of the water, their skin becomes very scaly and dry. This is almost like what our drow are in the world. And that was James's concept. We should make them like the drow. So those are the Dorsai elves, Lovecraftian elves that live in R'lyeh, basically. And then there's the Drivi elf. The Drivi are thematically, at least in principle, like when America left Britain to start their own colony. The Drivi left the life tree. They said, no, we understand that the life tree is waning, its magics are failing, and if we are to stay here, eventually we will all die. So progress is our future. So they essentially left in a bloody civil war. They went down to a mountain range known as the Sphere Mountains, and they are like old magic. They're trying to kind of forge a new way, not Elven, not Fae, but tapping into the bleak, tapping into the new world, very like frontier, think Native American, colonial, and so we'll dial that in, but they are essentially trying to make it on their own. So those are the elves. Let's go back to the chat. All right. Okay, Syntax AI has a great question. He says, what is Dragongrin? Dragongrin, which has probably been answered in the chat, is the campaign world that me and my brother James publish books about through our publishing company, Absolute Tabletop. So it is a campaign setting where it posits that evil has won and beat the good guys. And so these are the races in that realm. And we're creating and writing a campaign setting guide that will be kickstarting very likely in March. Shackford Trap says, I got a fever, and the only cure is more mustard. Karen Davies, I'm a goat. I can't ungoat Karen. Dylan Allen says, Dragongrin is tabletop terrorist campaign setting. Thank you. Mitchell is here. What's going on? Made it. And then B. Flummy says, flavor and mechanics. This is races. Warmaker777. Is there a race that you're not a fan of, but you feel needs to be included because they're considered a fundamental race? Personally, never been a fan of elves. So, there are some races that maybe I don't like as much, but rather than including them in an obligatory way, I threw down the gauntlet and said, well, why don't I just make them something I love? I can do whatever I want. It's our campaign world. And I've got 3 guys who I know will check me if it's too off and dial it in. So instead of saying, oh, we gotta include gnomes, it's like, no, let's make awesome gnomes. Let's make gnomes that everyone, even people who don't like gnomes, say, oh, well, I would play that. So yeah, there are some that we feel like, hey, maybe that's not my favorite. So we sought to capture something stronger to pull people in anyway. Oh man, and then Matt says, Dorsai are my jam. Yeah, we're gonna have a ton of fun with that. I can't wait to get the art for that. Dale says, Bleak, forgive my ignorance, but is Dragongrin and Aeronoth part of the same world? They're in the same universe. Landmass is separated by the Bleak. So we have a shared campaign universe known as Arbitron. And so Arbitron is essentially these different campaign settings floating in this magical maelstrom. And it's called the Bleak. So yes, they're in the same universe. In fact, Quintrek Coppermist is from Ankea, but I play a character in the world of Sorceline on Be a Better Game Master's channel. C.A. Hollenbach says, messaged you last week about finishing half-done projects, and I'm doing it more and more. Thank you again, Tim and James, for your constant inspiration. Awesome. Keep it up. I will stir you again and say, projects that are 3/4 done are sometimes harder to finish than the ones that are half done. So don't get stuck in that trap. Don't get endgame syndrome on your projects. All right, we're gonna jump into some halflings. This was one of those races. I think halflings have been represented very well. I don't mind halflings at all, but we wanted to do something just a little more interesting, something a little different for us anyway. And so, the hearth-built halflings. These are doozer halflings from Fraggle Rock. These are construction, sort of build with their hands sort of halflings. So, the idea here is, imagine that they build these cities, but then under them there are even bigger, more well-protected cities. And so they're utilitarian. I even like to think that they had something to do with building that underground cavern I was referencing before, known as Sphere Below. I think that the hearth-built halflings probably played a really big part in securing it and putting up the beams and the joists that keep it all from collapsing. They probably still upkeep it. Silverwise halflings. So the Silverwise halflings, we had a cool concept, but we didn't know how to tie them to the world exactly because they didn't have a homeland per se. So the name Dragongrin in our campaign setting basically means grave of dragons. See, because in Dragongrin, the word grin means 1, to rise honoring the dead, or 2, the grave. And so we said, okay, this is dragon grave. So when I refer to a grin or a dragon's grin, that's what I'm talking about. Now the Silverwise halflings, they are touched by that desolation, that thing we were talking about before that really messed up the Dorsi and made them all Lovecraft. But almost similar to like Doctor Strange, minor spoiler for Doctor Strange if you haven't seen it, I'll give you a second. Just mute me for a second. In the same way, well, I won't spoil it all the way. There's a character who draws power from an evil to gain immortality. And themselves, they have not quite turned evil. In that same way, I would think that the Silverwise are drawing this energy from these dragon corpses and these Dragongryns. So that is their deal, but they're very spooky, sort of like, imagine necromancers, but instead of corpses, it's ghosts and spirits, that kind of thing. So that's the Silverwise halflings, very sort of creepy. And then finally, the Boldwine halflings. I make it no secret that the Boldwine halflings were inspired by the gypsies from the movie Snatch. I just love that idea that there are these halflings who breed dogs, who are adventure junkies, who are adrenaline junkies, and they pit fight. That's just fun. And so, and Matt sort of teased me about this. In the document where we write it, I said their family histories are passed down through non-magical tattoos. And I specifically put non-magical because anytime you mention a tattoo in a D&D setting, all of a sudden they all have arcane power, so just regular tattoos. But those are the Boldwine halflings. And so one of the character options when you start as a Boldwine halfling, you get a dog. That's just one of the racial traits, is you can choose to get a dog. And I just think that's awesome. I think it's really cool. So let's go back to the chat. Let's see here. Going back up, all right. Oh, Dale says, love it. Always hoped they'd collide. But what about Barker's World? The name eludes me. Yes, absolutely. In fact, I would say everything that we've come out with to date is in Arbitron, except for Harbinger. Don't know why, we just all agreed tonally. We like the long time ago in a galaxy far, far away vibe. We don't want it to be, you know, Arbitron, millennia in the future. We want this to be, Harbinger is a sci-fi, well, science fantasy game that we are in current playtesting for, and you can find that on our website, but that is the only setting that I know of offhand that is expressly not included in Arbitron. We just tonally wanted to keep them separate. But other than that, everything else, Gloam is another one. It's our sort of flintlock fantasy setting. That is also in Arbitron. And so as we make the backgrounds, you know, we're gonna have backgrounds in the campaign setting guide. One of the backgrounds is from a land afar. Excuse me. And so you can basically choose to be a character from Enkea, or from Gloam, or from Aeronoth. And it gives you some little background stuff for that. All right. Yeah, and then Matt says, yeah, and Kea is in there too. And Kror. Kror is Matt's like very brutal heavy metal setting set on one of the moons of Arbitron. You know, one of the cool things about Crore, we haven't really said it canonically, but we've had sort of passing conversations, and at least in my head canon, Crore takes place a good 100 years or more before anything that would happen current day, Provokers, or any of that stuff, Dragongrin, because I love the idea, maybe even like 500 years ago, because I love the idea. Again, this is my head canon, this is Tim, this is not absolute tabletop, but I love the idea that as you walk down a road in Dragongrin, Crore is long dead. They didn't make it. It's essentially, it's a super dungeon of, you know, creatures that are no longer living. Something like that. But anyway, all of that to say, if you go to absolutetabletop.com, you can check out all these campaign worlds and get involved. Matt said it best, and I thought it. I just didn't know how to word it. He said, we didn't want to do Starfinder, where it's literally a fantasy setting in the future. Harbinger is cordoned off and not allowed to play with the other kids. Harbinger is that sort of not tween. It's that one campaign setting that's like 16 and saying bad words, so you keep it away from the other kids. I don't know what I'm saying. Thank you all for hanging out. Thank you all for watching. If you're enjoying this and you want to make sure that you catch these live streams, be sure to subscribe to the channel and then hit the bell in the corner so that you get notifications when I go live. Peter says, Halflings? Bah, those are just compact dwarves. But let me ask you, after I explained the bold wine Halflings, did it make a little more sense? Were you a little more intrigued? Because we're going for uniqueness without snowflakiness. And then Warmaker777 says, I did that in one campaign I ran. I made up that the elves are reincarnated spirits of men who did horrible things to seek redemption. That's cool. Super cool. Love the bold wine Halflings, says Dale. Millennial dwarves. That's Peter. Am I saying it right? There's a tilde over the P. Ralph, what's going on? He says, Bear God, what up, Tim? Love the Halflings. Dude, thank you. What? Who's the Bear God? Dale Quave says, the red-headed stepchild. Warmaker777, speaking of tattoos, have you heard of scarification? I believe it's a traditional African practice. I have. But basically, it's carving designs into your flesh. The scar makes a design. I have heard of that. There is a race, we're going to get to them next. Well, we'll get to them soon, of orcs that use scarification. All right. Let me hold you aloft to my bosom as I change the page. I at least had the forethought to use staples. I thought, how funny would that be if at least 10 minutes of this video is me running around chasing my papers, blowing in the wind? Probably be more entertaining. Oh, actually, I want to just hit a couple of comments real quick. Hearing about the Snatch plus Bold Wine connection makes me want to play one. Boom! Brad Pitt character. Brad Pitt's character in that movie is one of my favorites. Yeah, I mean, because who doesn't want to... You know, you roll up to a tavern, and you kind of go in, and you're really getting the lay of the land. You like dags? You like dags? That's what we're going for. There's going to be a whole chapter to whether or not you like dags. A Fistful of Dice says, Harbinger shows up at Ankea's birthday party and brings Mortal Kombat. Yes, that's what happens. That's exactly right. Oh, Peter says it sure did, pal. I hope you were talking about interest you in playing Halflings. All right, so we're going to talk about gnomes. Now, I'm not sure why everybody hates gnomes, and you don't have to tell me. It's best kept to yourself, unless it's a rational reason that you want to converse about, not just try to convert me. But I don't mind gnomes at all. I think they're kind of cool. And so here are the 3 different brands of gnome. Now, one of the notes here that we're toying with, because all of the descriptions went down this path. So it's looking like gnomes are going to be sort of the innate psionics of Dragongrin. Now, I'm not saying they're all going to be like, you know, rogue eidolons, like blasting people apart with their brains, but the idea is that they sway more toward that bent, so they're more natural to it. In the same way that a halfling might get luck. Whew, can we tell it's a little hotter today? I got the vapors! The Dragongrin vapors are known as the bullet sweats from Dragon Hurl. No, I'm kidding. All right, so the Sarfin gnomes are the first gnomes we're going to talk about. Think of it this way, and these are kind of the most outlandish. A long time ago, when the world was very young, these two races that were godlike, the ones that carved out Deep Vault and this sphere below, they had a war. And in that war, they created a lot of technology. Well, the gnomes kind of latched onto that and were able to pretty much go into a pocket dimension known as the Ord Mist. I tell you that because they messed up. They crashed their big interstellar ship into a big wasteland known as Bismore. Now, Bismore is basically like Black Stump / Australia / Mad Max. It's in Uldane. So just imagine that as you see the bleak clouds rolling over the dusty plains, in the distance you see this crazy silhouette of a huge ship that crashed. Now, we're gonna handle this really gingerly because we don't want it to just be Starfinder. This is sort of, if you want to think of tonally what we're looking at, it's like Disney's Lost City of Atlantis, that kind of thing. So it's not going to be super techy. It's more like, I don't know how to say it, stone tech. Anyway, the Sarfin gnomes are very heavily psionic. They have some working tech, but their whole thing, very District 9-ish, is they're essentially trying to go and pick the pieces from the different parts of the realm so that they can rebuild their ship. And that's like their whole jam. And so, hold on, I'm gonna walk around here. So that's the Sarfin gnomes. Now the Sarfin gnomes, you might have like an old blaster with one shot in it. You know, actually, if you want to think of what the Sarfin gnomes are, think Numenera. That's a really good sort of tie down where it's like, okay, these are like Numenera-esque. Okay, I'm really happy with these. Matt really helped with these, and then James and Barker dialed it in. Glimmerforge gnomes. Now, I'm gonna tell you, Glimmerforge gnomes, just a day ago, were Glimmerfizzle gnomes, okay? Glimmerfizzle gnomes are too gnomey. They're just too on the nose. They're too like, okay, here are the gnomes of Dragongrin. Glimmerforge gnomes are still tinkers. They're still inventors. But they use this repurposed ancient technology we've talked about from the ancient wars. They collect it, they scavenge it, much like the Sarfin, except Glimmerforge gnomes aren't looking to go anywhere. They're looking to use it like Miles Bennett Dyson. They want to get the, Matt, do the quote. They, it's, I don't remember it. It's a metal endoskeleton covered in a polymer alloy. I don't know. The point is, in Terminator 2, the paradox that's created, well, I won't get into all that. They are looking to repurpose and build off of this technology, using it as a jumping off point. So, they alter themselves. They give themselves like Titan Tech, is what we call it. Titan Tech eye enhancements. Titan Tech like arms, legs. And some of them are a little more mad science-y, and they'll even go like monster parts. Like, just crazy stuff like that, where they might have claws or different things like that. Oh, there it is. Matt got me. I am a cybernetic organism, living tissue over metal endoskeleton. And then he cuts that perfect cut down his forearm. And you're like, man, Schwarzenegger's, even his fake arm is jacked. So anyway, that's the Glimmerforge gnomes. Now, the Glimmerforge gnomes, as of now, currently, are responsible for creating these constructs known as tome hearts. And so, anyway, that is the Glimmerforge gnomes. And then we're going to finish it off with the Dagger Tongue gnomes, another sort of shrewd, deceptive, sort of based in like minor illusions. They are using those gnomish empathetic abilities to do more wheeling and dealing. So Dagger Tongue gnomes are, I imagine them as being like the trade moguls. Like they are the ones. They own the land, they own the trade routes, because they can negotiate. And it's widely believed that they can negotiate because they're able to control people's minds slightly. Suggestive psionics, more to say. Anyway, those are the gnomes. Let's go back to the chat. All right. Dale says, so Harbinger is the cool older cousin that everyone wants to play with but isn't allowed. Exactly, says me and Matt Click. Peter says Huns also had facial scarifications. Oh, that's cool. I will look to that. Josh Hulls, the lycanthrope dwarfs are my favorite. I can see them forming noble clans based around their spirit animal. Exactly. Or maybe it would justify a case system. That's actually a really clever idea. The Giggleberries. Not making that one up. I wish I was. That's the best. Hey, Tim, can't wait for the Kickstarter. As What You Looking At says, as Randy Newman once sang, short people got no reason to live. What a brutal statement for people who don't know you. I know that Josh is actually a really nice guy. I hang out with him on Discord occasionally and have played at least 2 rounds of Overwatch poorly with him. Okay, Peter says, now this I'm interested in. Most settings usually portray gnomes as something that is in between dwarves and halflings. Not us, man. Warmaker777 says, my reason for not including gnomes is I feel you can have dwarves do what dwarves do and it still makes sense. I did toy with the idea of gnomes being enslaved by dwarves, combining the ideas. That works. I think gnomes are almost what happens when elves and dwarves mate. Ew. By the way, I'm sure you still get asked this like every day, but have you or James gotten a Plants of Tyranny yet? I still firmly believe that would be a great inspiration for Dragongrin. I'll tell you a quick story. We haven't played it, but when it came out, I think they premiered it. It was like E3 or one of the conventions. So it's a playthrough. It's 20 minutes long. It was really defeating because it's so much like Dragongrin, and we're like, oh, we didn't know this existed. But it just proves the point that there are no new ideas, and if we let that stop us, that's a foolish idea. So instead, we were like, okay. Now I will say at this point, I have purposely avoided it on purpose because I don't want to be inspired by it now that I know what it's about, and it's very similar tonally, thematically. I want to make sure that we stay away from it, and then maybe afterward, when the book's out, I'll sit and enjoy a good Tyranny campaign. Oh no, it's the T1 million. That is an inside joke from Absolute Tabletop. Oh, Shadowrun gnomes, I see. Sure, I've never played Shadowrun, but I will take your word on that. All right. Now we're gonna talk about tieflings. Oh, I'm so happy with the tieflings. They also needed a little something, and so we were, we had some cool ideas. I think that the tieflings, I know that the tieflings of Dragongrin were the first race we sussed out because that's the first PDF we released. Before we were even Absolute Tabletop, when we were just Tabletop Terrors Publications, we made the tieflings of Dragongrin. Why? I'll tell you flat out. Because the artist we were working with was going to let us use his tiefling art. That was it. That was the creative decision. Hey, you have the most art of what looks like tieflings. We're gonna do a tiefling book. Some ideas laying around. We really shaped them up into something really cool. So, all of the tieflings of Dragongrin are a remnant of an invading force that came through Jahar, our desert region, long, long ago. Now the remainder splintered, very stranded sort of thing. Now, there are 3 different tiers. Oh. Stay with me. All right, cool. So, it says very bad connection every time I walk through this spot, but only on the way back. I know this sounds like, seriously, this probably sounds like a conspiracy theory, but I think that like one of these businesses is using like a Wi-Fi signal blocker. It's like, get off my lawn. So anyway, yeah, just let me know. Make sure you let me know if I'm live and you can hear me. If someone could respond just one more time to make sure. And while that happens, Ben Buckner says, it's the T-1000. The signal usually kicks right back in as soon as I walk around this corner. Okay, cool. All right, so all of the tieflings remain, and they splintered off into 3 different groups. The coolest of them, I'm gonna save for last. But 2 of the 3 factions were very, very different in flavor. One of them, I actually have had Jarl DM even say like, these don't make sense for the world. I think they make sense because they're so different. This is actually the Greenock Thane tieflings. They have found almost a monk-like devotion to discomfort. And that discomfort is what allows them to grow and not grow weary and forge through. So they've devoted their lives to living in a forest, which they hate, and also devoted themselves to learning how to cook. So they are like insanely good cooks, and they practice something known as arcane gastronomy. If you get the if you get the Tieflings of Dragongrin book, there's a bunch of like potions that are reskinned as food. So if you get Tieflings of Dragongrin on AbsoluteTabletop.com, you'll see that they're insane. The Vylok Tieflings, also in that same book, escaped captivity by essentially putting on plays. I'll give you a very quick rundown of that. The way that they did it was the hubris of their leader, their slaver. They knew he was very, very egotistical. So it started off as one little play, and then they were like, oh, and it got better, and it got better, and it got better. And then they were like, oh, can we use real weapons? And can we use, and so they became this troupe, and they would do all these different plays in honor of this person, this sort of dark lord named Dragongrin, until eventually they had written this opus, and they convinced Dragongrin to invite all of his viziers and all of the people from the region. And essentially, at that point, they had honed themselves, and they were using real weapons, and they had learned real magic, and this entire troop of tieflings turned and slew everyone in the theater. And so, pursuant to that, the Vylok tieflings hold theater, song, and all of those things very dear. So they treat it like a religion. So those are the Vylok tieflings. Now, let's go to the Festier tieflings. Festier tieflings are the remnant of the warrior tieflings who came through so long ago. If you want to know what they are now, of the three, they held on to tradition, they held on to honor, they are Mandalorians. So they are like Mandalorians from Star Wars, complete down to having this sick armor that everyone pines after. We specifically were like, no, these tieflings are just killer. They're awesome. They have killer, awesome weapons. They're scattered now, just a remnant of what they were. But you'll see them as bounty hunters. You'll see them as assassins. You'll see them as hired muscle, mercenaries. So these tieflings are like the killer, kicking rear end, Mandalorian tieflings of Dragongrin. So yeah. All right, let's go through some comments. I think what we're gonna have to do, I think tomorrow I'm gonna have to go through the unique races, because I don't think we have time. I don't think we have time right now to do it. I have to get back. But let me answer some more comments and we'll go. Does a tiefling running through the forest occasionally get their horns stuck in branch? Yes. Yes, they do. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, these branches. This is what they say to each other. Have you seen the branches under Talus? It's ridiculous. Stay out of there. The traffic for your horns is ridiculous. Ridiculous. I take the eye in a 7. Ben Buckner says, oh cool, I've always wanted a chef cook themed subclass. Maybe I'll give a tiefling a play in Dragongrin. You know, that's one of the backgrounds we were batting around, is chef, but you know, we're still working on that. But that would be cool, right? To play a Greenock Thane tiefling with a chef background, like, ugh, that'd be killer. Fahad is here. What's up, man? Warmaker777. Oh, speaking of the food tieflings, anyone looking for inspiration for food to use in a game, look up Townsend's on YouTube. They have 18th century food, but many of the recipes are updated from medieval. That's killer. Also, we have a cookbook. Yes, you heard me. Like, I'm serious, a real one. We have a cookbook on our website. It's called A Cookbook of the Realms. It's a thematic cookbook with real recipes in it. And in addition to the real recipes, there's lore and there are fictional recipes. And so, check it out. It's a really kind of like coffee table book, I feel, but it's got some of the best recipes you'll find. I mean, the chocolate chip cookies in there are my absolute favorite in the world. Matt has a recipe for this amazing steak. There's just some really good stuff in there. So AbsoluteTabletop.com and check out A Cookbook of the Realms. One final comment. Let's see here. Oh, and Warmaker777 mentions that same thing. And then Michael Maitland says, cooks use pots and pan as weapons. They could. But what if instead they used a well-placed meal to gain your trust and earn your affections? I'm not gonna kill him. He sure can cook. You know, so there's that option too. Anyway, guys, may you mend the first break. May you kill the first snake. May you conquer everything you undertake. Until next time, may your dice roll high. Sláinte.